Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today I'm going to be doing a first look at the game South Pacific. This is the Solomon's Campaign 1942 to 1943. It is part of the Second World at War series from Avalanche Press, and it's kind of a remake of an older game called SWWAS. And this is kind of a new deluxeified edition, so to speak. And it is designed by Dr. Mike Benninghoff, who is the man behind Avalanche Press. So let's take a look at the back of the box here. So as you can see here, this is actually a fairly thin box, but it's actually pretty hefty. It's got some good weight to it. And so this is South Pacific. The U.S. Navy began its offensive against the Japanese in August 1942 with landings on Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. The Japanese struck back and fierce naval battles raged in Iron Bottom Sound by night, while aircraft carriers dueled by day. The Americans and their Australian allies steadily fought their way up the Solomon's chain until the Japanese base at Rabaul was finally isolated in June 1943. South Pacific includes 50 scenarios covering the naval battles of Guadalcanal, the carrier battles of the Eastern Solomons and Santa Cruz, the battles of Vela Gulf, Ypres, Augusta Bay, and Columbangara, and much more. It says 30 minutes to many hours. It's a two-player game. 36 nautical miles per sea zone. There's actually two scales, one on the operational map and one on the tactical map that are somewhat different. 281-inch and 840 half-inch counters. 3 maps, 40 scenarios, a 40-page rule book, 50 scenarios. It's a 2.5 out of 5 difficulty, and it's fair for solitaire play because there is hidden movement, especially, particularly, I should say, the operational map, of course, is, involves a lot of hidden movement, and they have fairly clever mechanisms for handling that. But let's take a look and see what's inside the box. So, as I said, the box is pretty full. You can see it is pretty full, as I mentioned. Let me reorient things. Okay, get a little broader look here so that we can actually look at this. So this is the series rules. It covers 40 pages. Right. The first through section 14 is the basic kind of standard rules, and then 15 through 19 are advanced rules, and then 20 through 22 are the optional rules. So if we look in here, 14 goes through page 27, and then 28 through 36 is the advanced rules, and then we have 3 pages or 4 pages, 3.5 to 4 pages of optional rules. The rules are fairly straightforward. This is actually my first exposure to this particular series. I have played a little bit of Panzer Grenadier. I do have a couple videos on Fire in the Steppe that I did fairly recently for my platoon level tactical combat series that I'm currently doing. And this is very similar to that in terms of the organization of the rules. Obviously, the rules are completely different, this being a naval game instead of a tactical combat, land combat game. And so this has kind of similar DNA to the Great War at Sea and the Second Great War at Sea, which is kind of the alternate history. There's kind of 3 versions of this. This is one of the flagship series for Avalanche Press, with Panzer Grenadier being the other one. They're kind of the 2 tentpole series for the company. And so there's a lot of content for both. There's a lot of options as far as what you want to play. Many things are out of print, but they can be found fairly easily. And there are new things coming out. They're kind of retooling and redoing some of the older stuff, revamping them, as was the case with this one, which, as I mentioned, was part of a game called SWWAS, or is very similar to the game SWWAS, which came out probably 15 or more years ago. I would say. I don't have an exact date. I'd have to look it up. But it is a very tried and true system, so there's not a lot of, growing pains anymore, I would say. So this is the book that is basically like the playbook, I would say. So this has all your scenarios in it. We have a description of the campaign here, talking about after Midway, how the Americans wanted to go on the offensive, but they had to be somewhat limited in scope because of, the focus for the United States in the first full year of their participation in the war was that Germany was the main enemy, and they wanted to deal with Germany first and kind of not tread water, so to speak, in the Pacific, but kind of that was a secondary, there was a secondary focus, so to speak. They didn't want the Japanese to run rampant, but they were looking for operations in an offensive way that were a little bit more limited in scope. So they elected to invade Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands, and that led to a lot of naval combat, particularly in and around Guadalcanal itself. So in this book, we have a lot of, this is a 40-page or 64-page book here, and it's chock full of scenarios. So the way these are laid out is pretty straightforward. So at the front, you have your special rules. So the rule book we just looked at was series rules. This is the rules specific to the South Pacific game. So there are very specific things that deal with, the warfare around the Solomon Islands in 1942-43. There are some optional rules in here as well. And after that, so that's only 5 pages. And then on page 6, you get right into the campaign stuff, the various scenarios. So there are 2 kinds. There are operational scenarios, and then there are some battle scenarios where basically you just play on the tactical map and you have, a good old ship-on-ship scrap. And that can include aircraft carriers, which obviously would mean involving aircraft and so on. So I meant to mention this when I was talking about the rules, but didn't. Unlike Great War at Sea, in which planes had a very, very limited participation in the First World War. In the Second World War, obviously, aircraft carriers really came into their age, so to speak. They supplanted the battleships as the main weapon of the navies of the world, and basically became the queen of the sea. So that in this game, because it is the Second World War, you do have to deal with aircraft. So the first one here, and you can see it's very detailed with the types of aircraft here at Rabaul, at Tulagi, at Leh, and then ships as well, and all the ships. Now, they have counters for the bigger ships. All each have their own individual counter. So things like, heavy cruisers, battleships, aircraft carriers, etc. They'll all have their own counters. Destroyers and escorts will have smaller counters as well, and then there are some that would be, maybe 2 things on one counter, 2 ships on one counter. But you can see the list. Like, this is the Japanese list of what they have at Truk, the 3rd Fleet, Shokaku with its complement of aircraft, Zuikaku with its complement of aircraft, etc., etc. Some battleships. You have cruisers. You have a light cruiser. You have some destroyers. You have more destroyers over here, some submarines, and then the Allied forces. You have Royal Australian Air Force at Espiritu Santo. You have at Efate, you have some Marine Corps aircraft. At Port Moresby, you have more Australian aircraft, etc. And then you have various task forces from the U.S. Navy with transports, some cruisers and destroyers, more cruisers over here. And then you have Task Force 61.1, which was the Saratoga Task Force. 61.2 was the Enterprise. 61.3 the Wasp, etc. So a lot of ships here for this first operational one, which is Operation Watchtower, which was the initial move against Guadalcanal. And so then you have battle scenarios, as I mentioned. So these are kind of subsets of the operational level. So the operational level is big picture, where you actually play out the movement of your ships on the operational map. And then once you get to a point where you have detection and you see each other, that's when you go to the battles and you play on the tactical map. And we'll see the tactical map and the operational map here in a minute. So we have our battle scenarios, and there are a lot of these as well. So as I said, there's just a ton of content in here. Here we have the landings, more lists of forces. You get, just like in Panzer Grenadier, you'll get a little note at the end because, Dr. Benninghoff is a historian. So he always puts in these little historical notes about what actually transpired in whatever the game is covering. And they cover a wide variety of things at Avalanche Press. So you have all of these operational scenarios, and then within those you have all of these battle scenarios, and they're divided up into chapters that cover different parts of the campaign, because this was a major campaign. It obviously lasted for well over a year, and or at least a year, I would say, if I remember correctly. And yeah, you have a lot in here, so lots of stuff here. It looks like this mainly covers like basically August through November, maybe. I haven't gone through to look at everything in here, but there's a ton. There is a ton. So that is I guess I would call it the playbook. And then we have our ship data book, which is really interesting because you have a list here of all the main ships, right? So here we have United States cruisers, and you have the number of guns and other things that are, data about the ships. So we have the Chicago here, CA-29. How many secondary guns, how many tertiary guns, its speed, its anti-aircraft rating, its hull, how much fuel it carries. There's an advanced rule for tracking fuel usage. You also have destroyers, pages and pages of destroyers, because there were many destroyers. We are at 7 here. Then we have multiple ship warships. So this is what I was talking about. These are multiple ships on one counter. And they're not going to have much in the way of armament. So, they'll have 1 point of AA basically, because these are transports and, things of that nature, not combat ships per se. And you have Japanese capital ships. We have U.S. submarines here. And then we have our Japanese capital ships. So I kind of missed the page with the U.S. capital ships, but the U.S. has the same. So you have all your battleships here, including Yamato, the big one, as well as Musashi, its sister ship, with all of their data. And you can see how armored they were and how many primary guns. So you get primary guns for the capital ships. The smaller ships won't have these primary. These are the big naval guns, obviously, on these battleships. Aircraft carriers have something totally different. They have flight deck ratings. They have some tertiary armament, some good anti-aircraft coverage in general. Hulls not as thick as what you'd have up here with the capital guys. Fuel usage, etc. And then they'll have cruisers and pages of destroyers as well. So you get a whole list of all that stuff. Now you get a whole lot of player aids as well. So here we have Axis airfields. So these are basically air bases, and you can see the various places where they are. Here's Rabaul, here's Tarawa, Truk, etc. We have one for the Allies as well, of course. So you'll have some, like here's Espiritu Santo, here's Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, etc. Milne Bay Milne Bay rather in Australia. Aircraft carriers for the United States. They have an aircraft carrier card, which lets you track where your aircraft are, rather, from hangar to ready to their missions, whether they're flying cap, search, or anti-submarine. The Japanese have one as well, as you would expect. And now we get to the counters. Now, I get the newsletter from Avalanche Press, and they often talk about their silky smooth counters, and I'm going to tell you right now, these are actually really nice. They feel real nice on your fingers. They don't punch out super easy, but they're not impossible to punch out. They are nice. There is a lot of data and little symbols and stuff on here. Like these are aircraft, obviously, and this is counter sheet number 5. Now this threw me off a little bit because this one is also counter sheet number 5. So these are aircraft. So I actually emailed Avalanche Press about this because I got this and I said, hey, I've got 2 counter sheet 5s and no counter sheet 3. Turns out that's on purpose. And there is a note. It's not in the box, so it's not obvious if you didn't happen to look at it on the website. But on their website, there is a note that indicates that counter sheet 3 goes with the midway game, essentially. And so it's not included in here. Now I thought, hey, I've got 1, 2, 4, 5, and 5. Where's my 3? And why do I have 2 5s? So I got an email directly back from Dr. Benninghoff himself, and he told me that you get 2 of these and no 3, and that's by design. And you're going to need these extra aircraft for all the stuff that's involved in this particular game, all the aerial combat with the carrier battles and, you know, the battles on Guadalcanal and some of the other islands in the Santa Cruz Islands and the Solomons, etc. So these are small counters, you know, the small guys, and there's a lot of info on here. As you can see, the print is pretty small. Like we've got a P40 here, and there's when I do a playthrough, and I'll do probably just a battle playthrough, but I'll talk about how the operational stuff works. I just probably won't show it because I probably won't have an opponent, but I'll go through what all of the symbology on the counter sheets means. So here we have counter sheet 4, and counter sheet 4 is chock full of ships. So these are destroyers, the Barton, the Fletcher, etc., O'Bannon. We have Japanese battleships over here. And you can see the 3 numbers. I can tell you this because it's easy off the top of my head. You have primary, secondary, and tertiary armaments. So you can see Musashi and Yamato, which I don't see on here, but it might be on the other sheet. Big, that's a big number, 18. Conversely, you look at like the battleship Washington here and South Dakota. This is a South Dakota class battleship, which was a relatively new class at the start of the war. That's a 1405, and you look at Musashi, is an 1843. This is a powerful ship right here. We have some Australian ships as well. They are represented too. And then we have some small ships here, as you can see. These are Aussies again, Japanese, some Americans. And these are 2-sided as well, so you can have these where you don't know what they are, but you see the silhouette of the ship. So you can tell that this is an aircraft carrier. That's what it looks like, and it turns out that that's what it is. That's actually a battleship, but Musashi's this one. I got my perspective messed up there. This is the battleship. These guys are aircraft carriers, of course. And here are your aircraft carriers. And you can see they don't have much in the ways of guns. But obviously that's not their main thing. They are aircraft carriers, right? Then we have sheet number 2. So again, we don't have a 3. And so we have more Japanese ships here. And some of the markers for the game. Task force markers, flight markers, submarine markers. And I think this is a nice touch. The Japanese submarine say Sensuikan, which is Japanese for submarine. So this is pretty cool. Task forces, etc. And again, these do feel really nice. The newsletter's not lying. These are silky smooth, I suppose. And then we have more American ships here and some more Japanese ships as well. Okay, so now we come to a map, and this is a special map. Now, usually you get kind of a generic map, and let me pause for a second so I can zoom out. So right here we see the Iron Bottom Sound map. This is an operational map, and it's or is this might be a tactical map actually, now I think about it. So this is a tactical map, but it's Iron Bottom Sound because the operational map has squares and these are hexes. So this is kind of unique in that they have something specific to this area as opposed to just being generic, because a lot of the games are just you're out in open water. There's not a lot of land and stuff around. And this obviously, the ships would go through the slot and they would have battles as well, of course. So this is something new for this game, and you can see down here the cartography by Tiffany Monroe was done in 2022, so recently. And so this is a nice map, and it is a tactical map, I am pretty sure. And so here is the operational map. So this is a much bigger area. Same size, basically. It's oriented a little bit differently. So I won't actually zoom out, but you can see like basically what you're looking at here. So obviously right here in the middle, these are the Solomons. You have Henderson Field, Tulagi, Guadalcanal is this island right here. Then up here you have, Buin and Buca, and Rubal is over here. Up to the north, which is kind of out of shot, you have Truck and Tarawa and Macon and so on and so forth. We've got some New Zealand, Australian forces up here. Yeah, this is New Zealand. I said Milne Bay was in Australia. It's actually in New Zealand. Oops, sorry. We have Australia down here in the corner. You have a legend here that explains what everything is. So you can see that they're boxes, and you plot for the operational part of the game, the operational scenarios, you plot your movement one turn ahead of time. And at the start, I believe you plot the first and the second turn, so that that's part of the fog of war. And you plot with task forces, and your opponent doesn't know what the compositions of your task forces are until they get detected, basically. So that's how that works at a very high level. There's obviously much more to it than that. So that is our operational map. And now here's the tactical map I was talking about. And the more I think about it, you can see like this is laid out differently than what that other map is. I forget the specifics of what the Iron Bottom Sound map is, whether it's a tactical map. There is an expansion for this game called Iron Bottom Sound, so it may have something to do with that. So here we have a map of, this is the tactical map. So you have basically the coordinates for the hexes have a letter and a number based on kind of like the band they're in from the center, and then numbers. So that's all important for resolving fire and things like that. And you can see there are tables on here as well. They're identical on both sides, but we have gunnery and ship, launch torpedo modifiers, torpedo damage, gunnery damage, critical damage, etc. So let me fold this guy up, and I'm going to reset my shot because we can zoom back in now. Okay, so here we have our task force card, one for each side. Right, so one for each side. I'm guessing this is Japan and this is the Allies, or Axis and Allies if you prefer. Then we have our tables card. So you have your task force contact. So this is for the operational side, right? Then you have initiative, sighting ranges, gunnery and ship launch torpedoes. On the other side, we have running aground, refloating, pursuit, excess damage, armored flight decks, aircraft losses, emergency repairs, foundering. This is a very detailed system. Then we have over here other tables: submarine contact, anti-submarine sweep, more anti-submarine warfare, hunter-killer aircraft, sub-attacks, sub-attack factors, sub versus sub, submarine torpedoes, a lone armored merchant here, shore bombardment, minefield, mine sweeping, amphibious unloading, ground combat, and sea air tables, target location. So obviously sea air is important in a game. Second World War in the Pacific, lots of carrier battles going on. Cap interception, sweep interception of cap, sweep interception of any sub patrol, air-to-air combat, anti-aircraft, bombing and air launch torpedoes, land bombing, takeoff and landing, air search, cap, interception of air search, and air search results. And another one, which is MTB contact, MTB attack. Those are motor torpedo boats, so the small guys, torpedoes, combat between the little guys, motor torpedo boats versus subs, merchant shipping, coast watchers, minefield damage. This one doesn't actually have a second side. Then we have our log sheet. Log sheet's important for noting missions and plotting things, keeping track of stuff. So that is what's in the box. Now, it might be a little bit before I get to actually play this, but I do want to play this. I also want to mention that this game has a Vassal module that was created for it by a gentleman named Matt Brown, I believe. And if you go on the games page on Board Game Geek, for sure, I know it's on here. It's probably on Consim World as well. You will be able to find it. I know it's on the game page for South Pacific because I just saw it today. So you can go check that out if you want to try and check this out. If you have the game, of course, you do need to have the game. Oops, I didn't put my maps back. So let's put our maps back. And our ship data book and our playbook, which I don't know if that's what they call it, but that's what I call it. And our rule book. And then our cover. So there you have it. That is a first look at the game South Pacific, Second World War at Sea, from Avalanche Press, designed by Mike Benninghoff, PhD. And as I said, I'll do a playthrough of this at some point, not sure when, but hopefully in the not too distant future. I do like naval games. In fact, another game I am working on getting a video done for is A Glorious Chance, which is the War of 1812 Lake Ontario game by Gina Willis, who worked on the very excellent Skies Above Britain with Jeremy White. So I'm looking forward to playing that one. That is a solitaire game, and it looks really cool because you can play as the British or the Americans. Totally different war, somewhat similar topic, I suppose, but I'm not going to digress too much on that, but that will be coming up as well at some point soon. So, as always, thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting. And, yeah, feel free to comment, ask questions, correct me where I was wrong, so on and so forth. I do like to interact with the viewers, and I do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and comment if you wish. Also, please consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing to help support my channel. That is always greatly appreciated. So that's going to do it. Until next time, my name is Joe. This is the Hexed Encountered channel. And as always, I want to wish you guys happy gaming.